Classic TV fans, Rick9G here. Thank you so much for joining me today. We're going to be talking about Three's Company, more specifically about the salaries of many of the cast of Three's Company. Now, I'm not going to get into every single actor, actress on the show. That's just not possible. I'm going to give you the head honchos and a few of the other head honchos and tell you how much they are worth. I'm also going to do the conversion in regards to inflation. So what may be $1,000 in 1979 is not necessarily $1,000 in 2022. So I'm going to tell you how much or how different that would be in regards to inflation and how much everything is worth today. So keep that in mind. I will give you the 70s and the current price. In case many of you don't know, my goal is to reach 150,000 subscribers by the end of 2022. The only way you can reach that is if you hit that subscribe button. It's absolutely free to do so. I have over 1,500 videos that I think you will absolutely enjoy on classic TV shows and movies. So don't forget to hit that button, support the channel, and let's get right to it. Let's begin with Richard Klein. Now, I'll talk about Richard Klein again in just a little bit when we talk about Don Knotts. But with Richard Klein, I'm just going to let you know how much he is currently worth. Now, this is in regards to 2022 and the estimates that are out right now. He is worth $3 million. Now, the reason I start with him is because he was, of course, a minor playing character on the show. But I will use him as a baseline because everything else, if we look at the Ropers, if we look at basically Mr. Furley, John Ritter, Summers, Joyce DeWitt, and Audra Lindley, you will see that he's pretty much on the bottom of the list in terms of importance in regards to significance of the characters. So now you can compare the Ropers higher or lower, and then we can compare Don Knotts and so forth. So that way you can see, well, who's really getting gypped here, and who's making a lot more than he maybe should. Well, that's for all of you to decide. Let's move on to the Ropers. Now, in regards to the Ropers, this is an interesting one. They were played by the amazing and equally talented Norman Fell and Audra Lindley. Now, let's start with Norman Fell. He's actually, at the time of his death, was not worth as much as Klein. In fact, only half as much, $1.7 million. Now, unfortunately, we can't get into the reasons why. That's just the estimates of how much he was worth. We can't talk about spending habits and salaries and movies and TV shows, and even in this one. But again, this gives you a baseline, and to me, this was very surprising to learn. Let's compare this to Audra Lindley, who was only worth $1.5 million. Now, again, that may seem like a lot, $1.5 million, but remember, in Los Angeles, California, currently, a nice home, 2-3 bedrooms, is easily worth over $1 million. That would be something basic, $1 million being a baseline. And so letting you know that that's what they're worth is something that you may be surprised, because when we think of these stars, we think of millions upon millions upon millions of dollars. Let's get to Don Knotts, because I think he will shed a light into a lot of what we've been talking about. Now, Don Knotts played Mr. Furley. He came and replaced the Ropers, essentially being the foil and the physical character that acted alongside John Ritter and just did so many hilarious physical gags. Now, he essentially made $1,250 per episode. I want to really stress that is per episode. Depending on the season, there were many different amounts of episodes. Now, let's take a full season that Don Knotts was on. He was on the full season of season 5. 22 episodes were there, so if you multiply 22 by $1,250, again, this is 1979 valuation, you get $27,500. Again, 1970s valuation. Now, I want to make this point that there were different amount of episodes. Season 6 had 28, season 7 had 22, and so forth. So anywhere in the range of $30,000 up to $35,000 a year. But let's convert that to 2020 inflation and take all that into consideration. So instead of $1,250 per episode, in today's valuation, Don Knotts would make about $5,000 an episode. Now, yeah, that's not too much if you think about it. But again, it's not as much as his co-stars. So let's take a look at them. I think, again, it'll lead you to a very interesting perspective. Before we get into John Ritter, Suzanne Summers, and Joyce DeWitt, I do want to talk about Richard Klein, who played Larry Dallas. Now, I would compare him roughly to what Don Knotts would make, roughly $1,250 per episode. I couldn't find a fixed amount, but it gives you a rough idea. He was not on the level of Ritter, Summers, or DeWitt in terms of importance of character and how much they would be paid. So he would be in that range, maybe even lower, but this gives you a rough idea. Now let's look at Joyce DeWitt. She played the amazing Janet Wood, one of my favorites on the show. Now, Joyce DeWitt made $30,000 per episode. Again, that's $30,000 in 1979 amounts. If we change that and convert it to 2022 evaluation, that would come out to $121,605.08. Now, that is per episode. I really want to stress that. So if we multiply that by something like 25 episodes, 28 episodes, the most ever in a season was 28 episodes. That is season 6. So that gives you a rough idea of how much she would make. And essentially, if you look at how much Joyce DeWitt is worth currently, she's worth $4 million. Now you can compare that to Richard Klein, who's $3 million worth, or Audra Lindley or Norman Fell, who are in the about $1.5 million worth. Let's take a look at Suzanne Summers. I think her amounts will blow you away, and I'll tell you why. Now, Suzanne Summers is worth the most of any actor on this entire show, and I'll tell you why. And it's not necessarily because of Three's Company. Well, partly. I'll explain. She also made the exact same amount as Joyce DeWitt. She made $30,000 per episode, that is in valuation from the 1970s and 80s. But if we move to 2022, that roughly comes out to, same as DeWitt, $121,605.06. Now, she is actually worth $100 million. She's currently living at the time of this episode. She, in fact, made a lot of her money with a lot of the things she sponsored on TV, like the Thigh Master, things like that. However, that popularity, the reason why she was able to do so well in her business ventures was because of Three's Company. So that's really interesting. She was even worth a lot more than John Ritter, but John Ritter made way more on the show, and I'll explain to you why. Part of the reasons why Summers left is because she wanted to make the exact amount of John Ritter. So we're going to get to him right now. Now, John Ritter, I mean, I would say he is the star of the show. Many people would equally split it between Joyce DeWitt, Suzanne Summers, and John Ritter, but I would disagree. I believe the show was Ritter's, and he had the supporting actors of Summers and DeWitt, and as well he had some other supporting actors, the Ropers, Furley, and Larry, and so forth. John Ritter made $150,000 per episode, may I add. Per episode. So that is completely nuts. Let me put this in perspective for you. That's $150,000 per episode in 1979. If we convert that per episode to 2022, that's $608,025.31. Again, that's how much you would be making today in today's valuation per episode. Now remember, there are at the most 28 episodes per season. Let's just do $150,000 and multiply it by 28 episodes. That's the most of a season. That's $4.2 million. $4.2 million in 1979. If we convert that to 2022, that is the same valuation of $17,213,087.14. That means that during the 5th or 6th season of Three's Company, he just made $17 million from the show just that year. That's not counting the other seasons, which is nuts. That is nuts compared to how much everyone else was making. That's for you all to decide if that's fair or not, and so forth. That was the deal they made. That's the deal that Summers wanted, and when they denied that to her, she absolutely left the show. She was done with it. She didn't want it anymore, and they of course replaced her. I won't talk about her replacements here. I think I've covered enough of the actors. If you really maybe want to hear them, I can maybe cover them in another episode, maybe talk about other actors as well. But I want to give you the main ones, the ones I believe that started off, the ones that are most well known, and the ones that make more sense, because obviously no one made more than Ritter, right? And Summers and DeWitt. Everyone else just gives you a baseline of where everyone is at. Let me know who surprised you the most. Did you think that any of these made more than they actually made? Do you think they made a lot less than they made? And who was fair, who was not fair? Why do you think certain people made a certain amount? Also, sometimes it's not to the individual. So I always want to stress that. It sometimes doesn't mean that, hey, Knotts wasn't a great person or he was not a great actor, that's why he made less. No, it has to do with many different factors, including their agents, people who negotiate for them, attorneys, their managers, things like that. There's a lot of factors here. So there's no one to blame. None of these actors are to blame in themselves. I have to say that. I want to protect them in that way. Let me know what you think. I'm really looking forward to seeing your comments. We'll see you all next time. And don't forget, everyone, be hopeful. Thank you so much to my supporters on Patreon, especially my Diamond tier patrons. New patron Gerard D, David D, Citizen Kane 359, Greg S, Kevin K, Ricky, Sally, and Vito L. Make sure to check the links in the description to see how you could be on this list as well.